Director of Open Europe, who's with me here in the studio. How much certainty do you think businesses have actually got today? Because they still, it seems to me, have to take a leap of faith that there will be a political agreement.
I think they've got quite a lot of certainty. We saw back in December that everyone was saying Theresa May, she's not going to be able to get that deal over the line to complete the first phase of negotiations. And she did, despite a bit of a wobble at the very last minute. And I think we spoke back then and pointed that out as a moment of good achievement on both sides. And back again now, assuming that the European Council signs this off, the heads of government, heads of state at the end of the week, she'll have got agreement on the transition. That's what businesses have been asking for, to give them some certainty. Now, this is a agreement, a sort of gentleman's agreement, if you like, from the heads of government, that they will keep things exactly the same for the period of roughly 21 months until the end of 2020, as if we were an EU member, but without voting rights. Now, it's possible that things will fall apart in the later stage of the deal. But I find that quite hard to imagine. I think this will now that this is being locked down, it's overwhelmingly likely that we'll exit with the transition.
What about the backstop issue on Ireland? She said the other week that that was something a British Prime Minister could never agree to, this idea that you put the border somewhere in the Irish Sea so that there's continuity between north and south in Ireland. She'd never get that through Parliament, so you wonder why you would put it in the document, because if she brought that back, the government would collapse, there'd be no deal. Sure. It sort of seems a bit of a moot point, really. So
I think what they've done quite cleverly here, I think, as Damien was saying, is park some of these issues, the most difficult issues, governance of the future trade agreement, but also the question of the Irish border, till later in the negotiations. And that's a good practice for negotiating. You don't want to deal with the very most difficult issues right at the beginning, and that's part of the problem we were seeing earlier. Some of this comes down to the problem that the UK has agreed to things which are, to a sense, contradictory back in December. So both sides fudged the December text to make sure that they could get over the line, and we've seen some more of that again today. So we don't know what's the answer on Northern Ireland and Ireland, and we'll have to wait and see. So that's one key area where there's going to have to be a lot of discussion.
Henry, in any negotiation there's give and take. Who's given more and who's taken more?
Well, I think on the question of the transition, it's a relatively narrow question. Probably the UK has moved further, but the EU has also moved. And I think that's perfectly sensible, because this is something that primarily the UK was asking for. And we could either spend a huge amount of our negotiating capital trying to design a bespoke transition period, or we could focus that capital on working out the future agreement. So I think it was quite sensible for the UK broadly to accept the EU's terms for the transition.
Henry Newman, it's good to see you. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.